Good morning, all of you. So, in today's class, we'll be discussing a new topic that is GDP deflator. So, in order to know that what exactly GDP deflator is, we need to have some understanding of some other concepts. For example, you must be aware that what exactly nominal GDP is. You must be aware that what exactly real GDP is and how exactly they both are different from each other. Now, even if in case you do not know the difference between nominal GDP and real GDP, let me explain that what exactly they are and how exactly they differ from each other. Thereafter, we will be switching over to the topic that is GDP deflator. We will be discussing that what is the purpose of calculation of GDP deflator. GDP refers to the total value of finally marketable goods and services produced within the territory of a country in one financial year. Here, territory also includes the exclusive economic zone of that country. This exclusive economic zone is the oceanic area which is connected to the country and it extends up to 200 nautical miles. This 200 nautical miles is equal to 230 miles or it is equal to 370 kilometers. So, within the territory of a country, whatever we produce in the form of goods and whatever we provide in the form of services, when we add their total value, we derive the GDP of the country. Now, nominal GDP is the GDP at market price. It is also known as the GDP at current price. So when we calculate nominal GDP, then in that case, the market price of goods and services will be taken into consideration. So the impact of inflation, impact of deflation, and even the indirect taxes which are associated with the goods and services, they all will be taken into consideration. On the other hand, real GDP is GDP at constant price. It is GDP at base price. So in order to calculate real GDP, we need to have a base year. At present, that base year in India is 2011-12. It is to be modified, and in 2026, this base year will be modified to 2022-23. But at present, the base year remains 2011-12. So when we calculate real GDP, that is GDP at constant price, then the price of the goods and services that was there in the base year will be taken into consideration year on year. So the price will not change, and hence real GDP will change only if the production changes. So let me explain it with example. Suppose in 2011-12, India produced only 10 cars and the market price of one car was 10 rupees. the nominal GDP will be 100 rupees. And since 2011-12 is the base year, even the real GDP will remain the same. It will remain the same. But in next financial year, that is in 2012-13, if again India produced only 10 cars and the price of one car increased to 12 rupees, this is because of inflation. This is the price rise. Here in this case, the nominal GDP will come out to be 120. But the real GDP will remain the same because the price is constant. So year on year, in order to calculate a real GDP, the price in the base year is taken into consideration. So it is inflation adjusted GDP. The impact of inflation or the impact of deflation will not be taken into consideration while calculating real GDP. So real GDP will change only if the production changes. But nominal GDP will change even if in case the production remains the same but the price changes. So this is the basic difference. Now GDP deflator is a mechanism with the help of which inflation can be calculated. GDP deflator is a mechanism with the help of which inflation can be calculated. So how exactly GDP deflator may help in calculation of inflation? See, in India, it is CPI, that is Consumer Price Index, which is considered as the most important index for calculation of inflation. To be more precise, it is CPI combined, which is the most important index used for calculation of inflation in. So it is Consumer Price Index. We have another index which is termed as a WPI. So WPI stands for Wholesale Price Index. So CPI calculates inflation at retail level, whereas the WPI calculates inflation at wholesale level. Now, whether it is a CPI or it is WPI, in order to calculate them, we use a particular basket. And this basket has a certain goods. If it is WPI, the basket will have only goods. If it is a CPI, the basket will have goods as well as services both. Now the number of items which are there in the basket, they remain fixed until and unless the basket is modified. So there is a convention in India that the basket is modified only after a gap of 5 years, but not later than 10 years. But if basket is used in order to calculate inflation, it will always have a limitation. And the limitation is what? Only the change in the price of those items will be taken into consideration which are there in the basket. So whether it is CPI or it is WPI, in both the cases, in order to calculate inflation, if we use a basket containing certain number of items, then only those items and the change in the price of those items will have influence over the index. So this is a limitation. So in place of such indices, Even GDP deflator can be used as a tool, as a mechanism for calculation of inflation. And GDP deflator has a formula. In order to calculate GDP deflator, the nominal GDP of the country in a particular financial year is divided by the real GDP and it is multiplied with 100. So this is the formula that we use in order to calculate GDP deflator. Now let me explain that how exactly using GDP deflator inflation can be measured. Coming back to the same example, suppose 2011-12 is the base year for calculation of real GDP. In this base year, one car in India is being sold at a price that is 10 rupees. So for 11-12, this is the market price. And since 11-12 is the base year, even in calculation of real GDP, the same price will be taken into consideration. So let us assume that in 2011-12, India produced only 10 cars and nothing else was produced in the country. And the price of one car was 10 rupees. So here in this case, for this financial year, the nominal GDP will be 100 and even the real GDP will come out to be 100. So nominal GDP and real GDP, they both will remain the same in that financial year. So how exactly the GDP deflator for this financial year will be calculated? It is the nominal GDP divided by real GDP multiplied with 100. So it will come out to be 100. It will come out to be 100. So this is how the GDP deflator of this financial year will be calculated. Now coming to the next financial year, that is 2012-13. Suppose India again produced only 10 cars and the price of each car increased to 12 rupees. The nominal GDP will come out to be 120, but the real GDP will remain the same, that is 100. Now how the GDP deflator will be calculated? 120 divided by 100 multiplied with 100. So the GDP deflator will come out to be 120. Now compare the GDP deflator of this financial year with the GDP deflator of this financial year. As compared to 100, 120 is an increment of 20%. It is an increment of 20%. So we can conclude that inflation has increased by 20%. So this is how GDP deflator is used as a tool in order to calculate inflation. The best part of this mechanism is what? It is not using a basket containing goods and services. So the number of items are not limited. In GDP deflator, since we are using the nominal GDP as well as the real GDP of the country, it includes all the goods and services which are being produced in the country in a particular financial year. But even GDP deflator has a certain limitations. For example, in GDP, we consider only those items which are produced within the country, but we consume even those items that we import. For example, we import crude oil, and even the price of crude oil has a huge influence over the inflation that is there in the country. But in calculation of GDP deflator, the price of such imported items cannot be taken into consideration because GDP includes only those goods and services which are produced within the territory of a country. So this is one major limitation. Another limitation is what? WPI and CPI as index, they are calculated every month, but GDP is calculated on a quarterly basis, and the data that we derive with respect to the GDP, it lags. So even after completion of the quarter, we do not have the data immediately available to us. So if in case GDP deflator is used as a mechanism for calculation of inflation, the availability of the data will lag. Whereas in case of WPI and CPI, the data is available on a monthly basis. So GDP deflator has its own limitations, and that is the reason why the RBI, in order to formulate its monetary policies, continues to use CPI combined as the most important index for calculation of inflation. So this is about the GDP deflator, and hope the concept is clear to you all.
For more informative content, like, share and subscribe, and do not forget to press the bell icon to get the notifications.